The kitchen was a living organism pushed far beyond its limits, a steel and fire beast howling in protest. Pans collided like weapons on a battlefield, metal shrieking against metal, each clang ricocheting off tiled walls slick with steam and sweat. Flames leapt beneath burners with animal fury, licking the bottoms of sauté pans as if trying to claim them. Knives slammed against wooden boards in relentless rhythm until the sound blurred into panic itself. Voices overlapped. Orders were shouted, mistakes were cursed, and the heat stole breath. This was not merely chaos. It was a pressure cooker of ambition, rage, and fear, and at its center stood Sebastian.
It's raw. You call this a scallop? It's rubber. Get out. Get out of my kitchen before I throw you in the oven.
Sebastian's scream tore through the kitchen like a blade. His face flushed crimson, veins standing along his temples, eyes blazing with fury, sharpened by years of perfectionism. To him, food was not sustenance, but legacy and proof of existence. A single undercooked scallop was not a mistake. It was an insult, a crack in the monument he was trying to build. His hands shook not with doubt, but with a barely contained urge to destroy whatever dared fall short of his standard.
Yes, chef. Sorry, chef.
The sous chef shrank under the weight of Sebastian's gaze, shoulders hunched as he backed away. Around them, the rest of the brigade froze with eyes lowered and bodies tense, each person silently praying they would not be next. Fear was as much an ingredient in this kitchen as salt, and tonight it had been oversalted. A plate suddenly became airborne, ripped from a trembling hand and hurled across the room. It shattered against the wall, porcelain exploding into white shards that skittered across the floor. A moment later, a heavy door slammed shut with bone-rattling force, sealing the chaos behind it. The echo faded, leaving a void so abrupt it felt unreal. Silence crept back into the kitchen, fragile and uneasy. The only sound left was the low mechanical hum of the refrigerator, steady and indifferent. Hours passed. The staff vanished into the wet night, and rain began to fall outside, tapping against windows and alley pavement, washing the city in a cold, reflective sheen.
Incompetent idiots. They are ruining my legacy. The sauce lacked acid. It lacks soul. Who is there?
Sebastian paced alone beneath the fluorescent lights, his footsteps echoing across the empty floor. His mind replayed every mistake of the night in cruel detail. He lifted a glass of whiskey to his lips, the burn grounding him even as it fueled his bitterness. When a sound cut through the quiet, his body stilled and his instincts sharpened. This kitchen was his kingdom, and nothing moved within it without his permission. From the back alley came a faint noise, the metallic clatter of a trash can lid, followed by a sharp, panicked gasp. The sound was small, yet in the stillness, it rang like a confession.
I saw you. Come out. If you are a rat, I'll call exterminators. If you are a thief, I'll call the police.
Sebastian moved slowly toward the back door, each step deliberate and predatory. The alley beyond was dimly lit, shadows pooling between dumpsters as rainwater dripped from fire escapes above. His silhouette filled the doorway, broad and imposing, a barrier between the warmth of the kitchen and the cold uncertainty outside. So please don't call the police. I was just looking for leftovers. Elise emerged hesitantly from the shadows, rain-speckled hair clinging to her face and eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Her clothes hung loosely on her thin frame, stained with water and grease. She looked less like a criminal and more like someone already punished by life, standing there with empty hands and nothing left to hide.
You're the new dishwasher the temp agency sent you. Why are you eating out of the bin?
Sebastian loomed over her in the narrow space. Recognition flickered across his face as memory snapped into place. The quiet girl at the sinks with her hands submerged in scalding water. He studied her with cold scrutiny, as if she were another flawed dish presented for judgment. Because I haven't eaten in 2 days, chef? And you threw away the risotto. It looked perfect. Her words came out haltingly, dragged from a well of hunger and humiliation. The mention of the risotto lingered in the air, daring him to react. To Elise, that discarded plate had been a small miracle, a promise of warmth she could barely remember feeling.
It wasn't perfect. It was garbage. The saffron was burnt. Let me see your hands. Filthy. You've been scrubbing pots for 12 hours.
Sebastian seized her wrist with a firm, unyielding grip. His hand was rough and scarred, radiating heat as if the kitchen had permanently branded him. He turned her palm upward, inspecting the raw, reddened skin and cracked knuckles swollen from endless labor. Calculation replaced anger in his eyes, and the moment stretched unbearably long. "I need the money, chef. Please let me go." Her voice dropped to a near whisper, desperation threading every syllable. She did not pull away, as if resisting might shatter the fragile mercy she hoped for. Rainwater dripped behind her, each drop counting time she could not afford to lose.
You smelled the burnt saffron? Most of my chefs couldn't smell it. Get inside, now.
Sebastian stared at her as though seeing her for the first time, something dangerous and curious awakening behind his eyes. Without another word, he tightened his grip and pulled her toward the kitchen's glow. The door swung shut behind them, cutting off the rain, the alley, and any chance of retreat. Whatever Elise had stepped into was no longer just a kitchen. It was the heart of the fire. The kitchen breathed like a living organism, warm and alive even in the late hours. Stainless steel counters reflected the low golden light, carrying the faint scars of 1,000 rushed services. When the refrigerator door opened, cold air spilled out in a sigh, clashing with the heat of the room. The gas stove answered with sharp clicks before erupting into a sudden, controlled flame, a sound that spoke of practiced hands and unthinking mastery. Butter hit the pan and immediately surrendered, melting and sizzling, releasing a nutty perfume that coated the air and curled into the senses, rich enough to make hunger feel like a physical ache. "Chef, what are you doing?"
Cooking. I do not let starving dogs die on my doorstep. It's bad for PR. Sit at the chef's table. Do not move.
Elise froze under the weight of his authority, the command settling over her shoulders like an invisible hand pressing her down into the chair. The chef's table was not meant for her kind of staff. It was polished, revered, almost sacred. Around her, the kitchen shifted gears. Knives struck wood in sharp, efficient rhythms. Ingredients were transformed with ruthless precision. Mushrooms sliced paper thin, and rice stirred just enough to coax out starch without bruising the grain. Heat rose and fell at his whim, every motion deliberate, controlled, inevitable. The sounds blended into a seamless montage of creation, the whisper of a blade, the hiss of wine hitting hot metal, the soft scrape of a spoon against the pan as the risotto thickened. Time seemed to stretch, pulled thin by anticipation. When the plate finally appeared before her, it was placed gently and reverently, as if the dish itself deserved silence. Steam rose in slow curls, carrying the deep, intoxicating scent of truffle and forest floor after rain.
Eat truffle and wild mushroom risotto, freshly made.
For me, this is $100 on the menu. Her stomach betrayed her, growling loudly in the quiet kitchen, a reminder of how long it had been since she had tasted anything made with care. Sebastian leaned back against the counter, arms loose and posture deceptively casual. His eyes never left her, sharp and evaluative, watching not just what she did, but how she did it. How her hands hovered uncertainly before finally lifting the fork.
I said eat. Tell me what you taste. And do not lie.
The cutlery scraped softly against the plate, an almost apologetic sound. Elise lifted the first bite, hands trembling just enough to notice. The moment it touched her tongue, the world narrowed. The creaminess spread slowly, coating her mouth, followed by the deep, earthy weight of mushrooms. She chewed and swallowed, her breath hitching as sensation layered upon sensation, richer and more complex than anything she had ever been allowed to taste. Oh my God, it is creamy. The mushrooms are earthy, but the word hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Sebastian's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, his eyes narrowing as if focusing on a distant target. The kitchen seemed to hold its breath with him, every hum and hiss suddenly too loud and too exposed.
But
It needs lemon zest, just a tiny bit, to cut through the fat of the butter. And did you use time? Silence followed her words, thick and suffocating. Even the stove seemed to quiet, leaving only the low mechanical hum of the refrigerator. Sebastian moved then, slow and deliberate, his footsteps circling the counter like a predator measuring distance. He stopped directly behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him at her back and the faint scent of smoke and spice clinging to his clothes.
yes,
The thyme is overpowering the truffle. If you used tarragon instead, it would be sweeter. Her heart hammered painfully as the implications of her honesty caught up with her. Who was she to speak? A dishwasher soaked daily in grease and steam, daring to criticize a man whose name was etched into menus and whispered with reverence. The air felt thinner and sharper, every breath a risk.
you are a dishwasher, and you are critiquing Sebastian Cross's signature dish?
I am sorry, that is what I taste. Fear tightened her chest, her apology tumbling out too fast and too raw. She braced herself for anger, for humiliation, for consequences she could not yet imagine. Instead, Sebastian leaned closer, his voice dropping, his breath warm against her ear, intimate in a way that made her shiver.
You are right. I used dried thyme because we ran out of fresh. I thought no one would notice, but you noticed. You have a palate, little mouse, $1 million palate hiding in a dishwasher's body.
The sound was not just fabric ripping. It was a violent, humiliating tear that echoed through the narrow, overheated kitchen, like a verdict being passed. Grease-stained tiles bore witness as Sebastian's hand seized the apron Elise had worn for months, the cloth stiff with soap residue, old food, and exhaustion. With one sharp pull, the knot at her waist surrendered, threads snapping in protest. The apron tore free from her body, fluttering briefly in the air before becoming a useless rag, stripped of whatever dignity it once pretended to have. The kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Hey! Her protest burst out instinctively, thin and startled, as if she herself were surprised she still had the right to object. Heat rushed to her face, not from the ovens, but from the sudden exposure, the sense of being peeled open in front of stainless steel counters and hanging knives. She stood, frozen, arms half lifted, unsure whether to grab for the torn apron or defend herself from whatever came next. The air smelled of burnt butter and something sharper, judgment.
That apron is disgusting. Burn it.
Sebastian's voice cut cleanly through the space, precise and merciless. He did not raise it. He did not need to. His gaze lingered on the ruined apron with open disdain, as if it offended him on a personal, almost philosophical level. Then, with a sharp flick of his wrist, he tossed something toward her. The white chef's jacket sailed through the air, pristine and blinding under the kitchen lights, untouched by sweat or failure, the kind of white that dared you to ruin it.
Put this on.
The jacket landed against her chest, soft, heavy, and impossibly clean. Elise's fingers closed around the fabric without thinking. It felt wrong in her hands, like holding something that belonged to another life, another version of herself. The weight of it seemed symbolic, pressing into her palms with expectation and command. Around them, the kitchen hummed on with ventilation fans and distant clatter, but the moment itself felt sealed off, suspended. Chef? I do not understand. The word slipped out of her mouth awkwardly, as if it did not fit her tongue. She glanced down at the jacket again, then back up at him, her mind scrambling to catch up. Only minutes ago she had been invisible, a dishwasher blending into steam and suds. Now the title hovered between them, absurd and terrifying. Her heartbeat thudded loudly in her ears, each beat asking the same question. Why me?
My sous chef is fired. You start tomorrow.
He said it as though announcing a change in the weather, a simple fact that required no discussion. Fired. Tomorrow. The words rearranged the structure of her reality with brutal efficiency. Somewhere upstairs, rooms she had never seen suddenly became relevant. Somewhere in the dining room, plates she had never touched waited. Sebastian did not explain himself. His authority was explanation enough, standing there in starched white and certainty. I cannot cook. I have never been to culinary schools. Panic finally clawed its way free. Her voice cracked under the weight of logic, of common sense she hoped might save her. Images flashed through her mind of burnt pans, under-seasoned sauces, humiliation served hot. She shook her head slightly, as if physical denial could undo his declaration. This was a mistake. It had to be. People like her did not leap kitchens or skip ladder rungs at a time.
Culinary school teaches you how to follow rules. I need someone who follows instinct. I can teach you how to hold a knife. I cannot teach you how to taste. You are moving into the staff quarters upstairs. You will be my shadow, my tongue. You will taste everything I cook.
Sebastian stepped closer, closing the distance with deliberate intent. His hands came to her shoulders, firm and anchoring, fingers pressing through thin fabric as if testing whether she was real. His eyes searched her face with unnerving focus, not for fear, but for something deeper, recognition. Each sentence landed like a commandment, stripping away her objections piece by piece. The words wrapped around her, intimate and invasive, promising both purpose and erasure. The kitchen no longer felt like a workplace. It felt like an altar. And if I refuse? The question cost her more courage than she wanted to admit. It rose from a final instinct for self-preservation, thin but stubborn. Her shoulders were still beneath his hands, her body caught between wanting to pull away and being unable to move at all. She searched his face for hesitation, for mercy, for any sign that this was negotiable. The silence that followed felt intentional and sharpened.
Then you go back to the garbage bin, and you waste that gift God gave you. Is that what you want? To be hungry forever?
A slow smile touched his mouth, cold and knowing, the kind that understood leverage. He painted her old life in brutal strokes of scraps, leftovers, and invisibility, and set it beside the future he was offering. Hunger was no longer just physical in his words. It became spiritual and existential. Hunger as punishment. Hunger as destiny. The choice pressed down on her chest, heavy and absolute. No, the word slipped out quietly, but it carried the weight of surrender. In that single syllable lived exhaustion, longing, and a fierce, desperate hope she had never allowed herself to name. She realized, with a strange clarity, that she was already starving for recognition, for meaning, for something more than survival.
Then say it. Say yes, chef.
He waited, patient and unyielding, certain of the outcome. The kitchen seemed to lean in, every surface reflecting the moment back at her. The jacket was still clutched in her hands, its white sleeves dangling like a challenge, saying it would change everything, not saying it would change nothing. Yes, chef. The words left her breathless, as if they had been pulled from somewhere deep in her chest. In speaking them, something irreversible clicked into place. The dishwasher apron was gone. In its absence stood a future she did not yet understand, wrapped in white and expectation, waiting to be stained. The next day arrived without mercy, and the kitchen was already alive long before the doors opened. Heat pressed down from every direction, rising from ovens, burners, and the sheer density of bodies moving in practiced chaos. Knives struck cutting boards in rapid staccato, pans slid across steel surfaces, and voices overlapped in sharp, clipped commands. The tempo was relentless, a fast, almost brutal rhythm that demanded total surrender. Oil popped and spat in the air, tiny explosions snapping like sparks, carrying with them the rich, dangerous scent of fat pushed too far. This was not a room that forgave hesitation.
Faster, Elise. The scallops are waiting. Do not think. React.
Sebastian's voice cut through the noise like a blade. It was honed by years of command, sharp enough to slice through fear, doubt, and exhaustion alike. Every word carried the weight of expectation, and in this kitchen, expectation was law. Elise felt it strike her square in the chest, the pressure to move faster, to become faster, to let instinct override thought. Around her, the line surged forward, flames leaping higher as if responding to his demand. "Yes, chef." Her reply was automatic and breathless. She pivoted, muscles moving on training alone, her mind lagging half a second behind her body. In that fatal sliver of time, urgency drowned out caution. Her hand reached, bare and unprotected, fingers closing around the pan handle that had been sitting over roaring heat. For an instant, there was no sensation at all, only contact. Ah! Pain exploded a heartbeat later, white-hot and absolute. The metal screamed as the pan slipped from her grip and crashed onto the floor with a violent clatter. The sizzling ceased abruptly, replaced by a sharp, echoing silence that felt just as loud. Elise cried out, the sound torn from her chest, raw and helpless, as tears sprang unbidden to her eyes. The world narrowed to the fire racing through her hand.
Stop the line. Everyone back.
Sebastian roared, the authority in his voice slamming down harder than any falling pan. Movement froze, then reversed in an instant as cooks stepped back, shoes scraping against the tile. Footsteps pounded as he crossed the distance to Elise in seconds. He seized her wrist, firm but controlled, grounding her even as adrenaline surged through him. The kitchen held its breath.
You idiot. You foolish girl. Never grab the handle without a cloth.
His words came out harsh, sharp-edged with anger, but his hands told a different story. He pulled her toward the sink, guiding rather than dragging, already turning the faucet. Cold water rushed out in a clear, relentless stream. He positioned her hand beneath it with precise care, adjusting the angle so the burn took the full force of the chill. It hurts. It burns. Her voice trembled, breaking apart as the pain shifted from searing heat to deep, throbbing agony. The cold felt brutal in its own way, biting into her skin, but she clung to it because it was something she could understand and endure. Her shoulders shook, the weight of the mistake pressing down as hard as the pain itself.
I know. Keep it under the water. Look at me. Look at my eyes. Focus on the cold.
His tone changed mid-sentence, the fury draining away to reveal fear. He leaned in close until she had no choice but to see him. His eyes locked onto hers with intense focus. One hand hovered near her wrist, ready to steady her if she faltered, while the other adjusted the flow of water. His presence anchored her, forcing her attention away from the panic spiraling in her chest. "I ruined the service." The words spilled out through tears, heavier than the pain itself. In her mind, the ruined dish loomed larger than her injury, a symbol of failure she had no defense against. She stared down at her hand, skin already angry and red, and felt the crushing certainty that she had disappointed him, the team, and the kitchen itself.
Screw the service. If you damage these hands, you damage my instruments.
Sebastian shut off the water with deliberate care. He reached for a clean towel and gently patted her hand dry, his touch unexpectedly soft and almost reverent. The kitchen noise slowly crept back in at the edges, but the space between them felt sealed off and private. He straightened, already turning toward the office, his mind shifting to solutions.
Come to my office. I have the burn gel.
The office settled into a hush that felt intentional and curated, as though silence itself had been locked in with them. The door clicked shut, sealing out the clatter of the kitchen beyond and leaving only the low, steady hum of the air conditioner. It breathed cool air into the room in slow cycles, raising goosebumps on exposed skin and sharpening every sound. Paper lay perfectly squared on the desk. Stainless surfaces gleamed without a fingerprint, and the dim light softened hard edges into something almost private. Sebastian's movements were deliberate and economical. He uncapped the gel and pressed it onto her skin, the texture thick and unyielding at first, then spreading under pressure. The sound it made was unmistakable, slow and adhesive, amplified by the quiet. He worked carefully, as if the office had become a treatment room and her hand a problem to be solved with precision rather than comfort.
This will sting.
He leaned closer and exhaled gently over her hand. The cool air washed across the treated skin, sharpening sensation instead of easing it. His breath lingered longer than necessary, controlled and calm, and the sting became focused and contained, as though given a boundary.
Better?
Her pulse raced ahead of her thoughts, each beat loud in her ears. The nearness of him, the quiet authority in the room, and the careful attention paid to such a small injury combined into something disorienting. She stood still, afraid that even a slight movement might break the fragile balance between them. "Yes, chef, why are you doing this? You usually scream at people who make mistakes." He did not look at her face right away. His gaze stayed on her hand, assessing it as he would an ingredient, weighing texture and potential. When he finally spoke, his voice carried no heat, only certainty.
You did not make a mistake of laziness. You made a mistake of passion. You were trying to keep up.
His thumb traced a slow path across her palm, rubbing the gel into the skin with firm but unkind pressure. The gesture was practical and almost clinical, yet it sent a quiet awareness through her body. He turned her hand slightly and examined it from another angle.
Your hands are small, too soft for this work. I will have to harden them.
The words landed with weight, not as a threat or a promise, but as a statement of fact. In his world, things were shaped by force and repetition until they became what they needed to be. How? He straightened slightly and gave her just enough space to breathe, though the room still felt charged. His answer came without hesitation, as if he had decided it long before the moment demanded it.
Training. From now on, you do not touch the pans until I say so. You stay by my side. You plate. You taste. You are too valuable to burn.
The word valuable echoed in the quiet office, heavier than any compliment she had received before. It framed her not as fragile, but as something worth protecting for a purpose. Valuable or just useful? He finally met her eyes with a steady and unflinching look that stripped the question to its core. There was no softness, only focus and intensity.
To a chef, there is no difference.
He lifted her hand and pressed a brief kiss to her fingertips. The gesture was restrained and almost formal, ending as quickly as it began and leaving the sensation behind.
Now open your mouth.
The command shifted the air and redirected her attention. He reached for a spoon, already loaded, the surface of the sauce catching the light with a rich, dark sheen. What? He held the spoon up between them, close enough that she could smell it, deep and concentrated with hours of reduction. This was not indulgence. It was assessment.
Taste this. The new reduction for the lamb. I need to know if it is ready.
She leaned forward and took the spoon from his hand, her lips brushing the metal. Flavor bloomed immediately, rich and balanced, unfolding across her tongue in measured stages. "It is my perfect. It tastes like desire." His voice lowered in response, approval carrying the weight of expectation.
Good answer.
Late night settled over the restaurant like a held breath. The kitchen, usually alive with clatter and flame, had gone still. burners cold and stainless steel counters reflecting dim pools of amber light. Outside the windows, the city murmured distantly, but inside, there was only the hush of after-hours intimacy. Every surface seemed to listen. The air carried faint ghosts of service past, citrus peel, roasted fat, soap, and steam. It was a private hour, pared down to two bodies and the quiet authority of ritual. Sebastian stepped closer, the soft whisper of silk announcing itself before it touched her skin. He lifted the cloth with deliberate care, brushed her hair aside, and drew it around her eyes. The knot came together slowly and ceremonially, as though precision itself were a promise. Darkness bloomed behind the fabric, immediate and complete. With her sight gone, the room rearranged itself into temperature, scent, and proximity. And his presence became a gravity she could feel rather than see.
We are going to calibrate your palate. Sight is a distraction. I want you to identify every ingredient by taste and smell alone.
Is the blindfold necessary?
Yes, trust me.
He moved away just enough to be felt in absence, then returned with something in his hands. Glass met air with a soft, sealed resistance before yielding, a small pop that echoed too loudly in the quiet kitchen. It was the sound of permission granted. The moment stretched as he positioned himself before her again, close enough that she could sense his warmth and the cadence of his breathing aligning with hers.
Open.
Something crunchy met her lips, guided with unhurried confidence. The texture announced itself first, a clean snap and a scatter of juice. Acidity flared bright and sharp, cutting through the darkness like a blade of light. She tasted with intention, letting memory and training rise to meet sensation. Sorting sweetness from bite, skin from seed, and cataloging nuance as though the world depended on accuracy. Pomegranate seeds? No. Red currant, tart, and acidic.
Correct. Turn. Next.
This time the offering was different, cradled with care before it reached her mouth. Warmth bloomed instantly, yielding under her tongue, rich and indulgent. Fat carried flavor in slow waves, coating her senses and inviting surrender even as it demanded discernment. The kitchen seemed to lean in, every silent pan and blade complicit in the intimacy of the exchange. A sound escaped her before she could stop it, a low involuntary response to the richness and heat of the bite. Oh, that is foie gras, pan-seared, with fig jam?
Caramelized onion jam. Close, you missed one element.
He leaned in then, invading the narrow margin of space she had left. His breath brushed the sensitive skin of her neck, warm and faintly spiced, carrying traces of smoke, herbs, and something indefinably his. The closeness disrupted her careful cataloging, and the blindfold amplified everything until concentration itself became a challenge.
What is the spice?
She drew in a slow breath, searching through overlapping impressions as his presence crowded her senses. I can only smell you, chef. Sage, cedar. The air tightened between them. His response was not immediate, arriving first as a restrained sound drawn low in his chest. Authority edged with warning, and the lesson threatened to tip into something else entirely if she lost her focus.
Focus on the food, Elise, not me, or I will fail you.
It is hard to focus when you are this close. Star anise. The spice is star anise. There was a pause, just long enough to savor the correctness of it, before his hands rose to her face. The silk slid away, and light rushed back in a soft shock. Her vision resolved into him, impossibly near, his expression intent and unreadable. The kitchen returned all at once, but something had shifted, and the lesson had carved a deeper line between them.
100%. You are dangerous, Elise. You see right through me.
The dining room breathed with a strained, unnatural quiet, the kind that settles only when too many expectations share the same air. Crystal glasses chimed softly as nervous hands adjusted their grip, and silverware rested untouched on porcelain plates, cooling by the second. Low whispers slithered between tables like guilty secrets, diners pretending not to listen while absorbing every syllable. Candlelight flickered against dark wood panels, casting long, anxious shadows that seemed to lean inward, as if the room itself were bracing for impact. This was not merely dinner service, it was judgment, suspended in the space between aroma and accusation. At the center of that tension stood Mr. Pomeroy, the critic whose voice had the authority to crown or condemn. He did not bother to lower his volume. His words were meant to travel, to bruise. Each syllable carried the weight of reputation and ruin, honed by years of being feared more than respected. He sat upright, chin slightly raised, a man performing dominance as much as discernment, fully aware that every ear in the room bent instinctively toward him.
This consomme is pedestrian. It lacks clarity. Did you let the dishwasher make this, Sebastian?
A shift occurred behind the kitchen doors, subtle at first, then unmistakable. The controlled chaos of the kitchen fell into a hush as heavy footsteps emerged, each one deliberate, measured, resonating through tile and timber alike. The sound carried authority, the unmistakable cadence of a man who had earned the right to be heard without raising his voice. As Sebastian stepped into the dining room, the air seemed to tighten around him, as though the room itself recognized its master, returning to claim it.
Actually, Pomeroy, my apprentice made it, and her palate is superior to yours in every way.
A ripple of discomfort passed through the tables at the word apprentice. Pomeroy's lips curled, not in surprise, but in delight, the way predators respond to perceived weakness. His gaze flicked briefly toward the kitchen doorway, then back to Sebastian, already constructing his dismissal. The insult gathered momentum in his chest, sharpened by entitlement and the assumption that brilliance could not possibly reside where he did not expect it.
Apprentice? This little girl. Do not make me laugh. She looks like she belongs in a fast food joint.
Sebastian's restraint shattered in an instant. He leaned forward and brought both hands down onto the table with a thunderous crack, rattling plates, glasses, and nerves alike. The sound cut through the dining room like a cleaver through bone, silencing whispers and freezing movement. In that moment, time stretched. His shoulders rose and fell once, heavy with controlled fury, his eyes burning not just with anger, but with something far deeper: protection.
This little girl identified 15 ingredients in a mole sauce yesterday. You could not identify salt if it hit you in the face. You are eating for free tonight, Pomeroy, because I do not charge people who lack the intelligence to appreciate my art. Now get out.
The room seemed to exhale all at once. Shock registered openly now, forks paused midair, mouths slightly open, hearts pounding. Pomeroy stiffened, his authority challenged in public, his power stripped bare under the warm glow of chandeliers. The threat he hurled back was reflexive, desperate, clinging to the only weapon he believed still sharp enough to wound: reputation.
You will lose your star for this.
Sebastian did not hesitate. He straightened slowly, reclaiming his full height, his presence filling the room with a calm that was somehow more intimidating than anger. His voice, when it came, was steady, resolute, unyielding. This was not bravado. It was conviction forged over years of sacrifice, failure, and triumph. He was no longer speaking only as a chef, but as a guardian of something far more fragile than prestige.
I have 3 stars. I can afford to lose one, but I will not afford to lose my dignity or hers.
The heavy, insulated door did not simply close. It slammed with the finality of a vault, sealing its secrets. The rubber gasket hissed as it compressed, locking the outside world away. Cold air rushed forward like a living thing, instantly tightening skin and stealing breath. Above them, the industrial fan roared into a steady, relentless hum, a mechanical heartbeat that filled the cramped space and erased any illusion of privacy. Fluorescent lights cast a pale, unforgiving glow over metal shelves stacked with jars, their glass bodies fogging as the temperature dropped. In a sudden burst of motion, Elise drove Sebastian backward until his shoulders met the unyielding shelves. The metal vibrated under the impact, a sharp clang echoing through the fridge. Her hands were firm and decisive, fueled by something that had been simmering all service long. The cold seeped through fabric and skin, but neither of them acknowledged it yet. The air between them felt charged, stretched thin, as if one wrong breath might snap it completely. "You defended me. You risked your reputation for me." Her words hung between them, crystallizing in the chilled air. She searched his face with an intensity that bordered on accusation, daring him to deny what she had seen on the line. In this frozen box, stripped of noise and witnesses, the truth felt heavier and harder to dodge. Her chest rose and fell quickly, each breath a small cloud dissolving between them.
He insulted you. No one insults my kitchen or my staff.
Sebastian's voice was controlled, but the control was brittle. He stood rigid, palms braced behind him against the shelves, knuckles whitening from the cold and the tension. The word staff sounded practiced and safe, something he had said 1,000 times before. Yet his eyes betrayed him, lingering on her mouth a fraction of a second too long before pulling away. "Is that all I am, staff? Because the way you look at me when I taste your food is not how a boss looks at an employee." She leaned in as she spoke, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her despite the freezing air. The accusation was soft but sharp, honed by weeks of glances held too long and silences heavy with meaning. Around them, the jars on the shelves stood like mute witnesses, labels peeling, contents suspended in brine and oil. Sebastian drew in a breath of air so cold it burned his lungs. It steadied him and unraveled him all at once. The temperature reminded him where he was and what this place was meant for. Preservation, not indulgence. His jaw tightened, as if he could physically lock the thoughts back behind his teeth.
Elise, stop. The kitchen is a hot place. Emotions boil over. It is not real. I am 53. I am married to this restaurant. You are 22. You are just hungry.
Each sentence landed like a barrier he stacked brick by brick between them. Age, duty, reality. He clung to these facts as if they were lifelines, proof that the moment was a trick of heat and exhaustion. Even as he spoke, his body failed to move away, and his gaze kept returning to her eyes. "I am hungry, but not for food." The admission was quiet and stripped of bravado, and that made it more dangerous. It was a confession spoken into the cold, an acknowledgement of a craving that had nothing to do with appetite and everything to do with need. The fan hummed on, indifferent, pushing chilled air around their bodies. Her hand came up and fisted in the front of his chef coat, the thick fabric creasing under her grip. The white cotton was icy to the touch, but beneath it, she could feel his warmth. The gesture erased the last of the space between them. "Feed me, Sebastian. I do not want the risotto. I want you." The words struck him harder than the cold metal at his back. Desire flared, sharp and immediate, cutting through years of discipline. His body reacted before his mind could catch up, and the room seemed suddenly louder and harsher. Sebastian shifted, trying to create distance, but the shelves hemmed him in. The chill bit into his spine as he struggled against both her hold and his own instincts. Every rational argument dissolved under the simple fact of her being there and wanting him.
We are in the walk-in fridge. It is freezing.
It was a weak protest, a statement of temperature instead of morality, as if the cold alone should be enough to stop them. His voice lacked conviction, swallowed by the hum of machinery and the heat building under his skin. "Then warm me up, like you did with the soup." She tilted her head slightly, a challenge and an invitation at once. The metaphor was deliberate, chosen to pierce his defenses and remind him of his hands steady over a flame, coaxing comfort out of raw ingredients. Something in Sebastian snapped quietly but completely. The rules he lived by frayed and fell away, leaving only instinct and want. His restraint gave way to a surge of heat that felt almost violent against the cold.
Fuck the soup.
He moved before doubt could return, gripping her and lifting her against the shelves. Cold metal met her back, and the jars around them rattled and clinked, glass knocking against glass in alarm. Their mouths crashed together in a kiss that was fierce and desperate, cold and hot all at once. It tasted of salt, breath, and unspoken truths finally released, the chill only sharpening the intensity. Weeks had passed since the last service that felt ordinary, and the kitchen now existed in a suspended state of breathless anticipation. The air was heavy with heat, metal, and restraint, as if every surface understood the stakes and dared not make a sound. Stainless steel counters gleamed under harsh lights, reflecting faces drawn tight with focus. No one spoke. No one dared. This was the kind of silence that only existed before judgment, before either triumph or quiet devastation. Then the printer came alive. It did not hum politely. It rattled and spat paper with relentless urgency, each ticket snapping free like a warning shot. The sound cut through the quiet, sharp and mechanical, stacking pressure with every printed order. The rhythm was merciless, a reminder that time was moving forward whether they were ready or not, whether perfection could be achieved or not.
The inspectors at table 4, this is it. The retaining of the 3rd star. I need the venison perfect. Elise, you are on the sauce.
Sebastian did not raise his voice, but the weight behind his words bent the room. His eyes locked forward, already seeing the plate as it must be, flawless in every detail. The 3rd star was not just an accolade. It was validation of years sacrificed, nights lost, and standards enforced without mercy. Assigning the sauce was not delegation. It was trust sharpened into a blade.
Chef, she's the apprentice. Let me do it.
The protest burst out too quickly, betraying fear beneath indignation. The sous chef's hands hovered uselessly, itching for control, for the reassurance of familiarity. Around them, burners hissed softly, pans radiated heat, and every cook pretended not to listen while absorbing every word. Hierarchies mattered here, especially when they were challenged.
No, her taste is better than yours, Elise. Do not fail me.
The refusal was final. Sebastian turned his gaze to Elise, and in that look lived expectation, risk, and an unspoken acknowledgement of her potential. The kitchen seemed to narrow around her, the sounds dulling as if the world had decided to watch. Failure was not an abstract concept here. It had a flavor, a consequence, and a name. Yes, chef, it's ready. Elise centered herself, shutting out everything except the saucepan in her hands. She tasted carefully, letting the sauce coat her tongue, analyzing balance and depth with a discipline beyond her years. A pinch of salt followed, then butter, folded in slowly until it glossed and thickened. She swirled the pan with deliberate grace, watching the sauce cling perfectly, knowing without doubt that it was right. The service bell rang out, bright and unforgiving, slicing through the tension like a blade. Plates moved with precision, hands choreographed by repetition and fear. Time stretched, then snapped back into motion. Footsteps echoed as the waiter disappeared into the dining room, carrying not just food, but the restaurant's future.
The inspector wants to see the chef.
The words landed softly, yet they struck harder than any shout. Conversations died before they could begin. Somewhere, a burner clicked off. Somewhere else, a cook swallowed hard. This was the moment where imagination filled the silence with every possible verdict.
Here we go. Elise, come with me.
Sebastian exhaled, a controlled release of everything he could not show. He straightened his jacket, already stepping toward the dining room, toward judgment made flesh. When he gestured for Elise to follow, it was not an order. It was an invitation into consequence, into recognition, into whatever awaited them beyond the kitchen doors. The dining room settled into a reverent stillness, the kind that only follows the final course of a meal that has demanded complete attention. Crystal glasses caught the low amber light, reflecting it across white linen like distant constellations. The air was warm with the lingering perfume of roasted venison, wine, and herbs, a layered aroma that clung gently to the senses. No one spoke. Even the cutlery seemed to hold its breath, as if the room itself understood that this was a moment to be measured, weighed, and remembered.
Chef Cross, the venison. The sauce was extraordinary. It had a note of juniper and chocolate.
The inspector's voice cut softly through the silence, measured and precise, each word placed with the same care as a garnish on porcelain. He held his fork loosely now, the authority of his role evident not in volume, but in restraint. His gaze lingered on the empty plate, as though the flavors were still unfolding there, evolving even after the last bite. The question was not casual, it was an examination, a final test delivered with calm curiosity rather than threat.
That was Elise's idea.
Sebastian did not elaborate. He did not need to. His reply carried a quiet confidence, tinged with something softer, pride shared rather than claimed. He stood straight, shoulders squared, but relaxed, aware of every eye in the room while refusing to chase their approval. Somewhere behind him, Elise remained still. Her presence felt even before it was acknowledged, like a steady heartbeat beneath the polished surface of the evening.
Brilliant. You have retained your stars, Sebastian. In fact, this might be the best meal I've had in London this year.
As the inspector turned his head, his eyes found Elise, and the smallest nod followed, an unspoken recognition that carried immense weight. The verdict landed not with drama, but with certainty. Years of discipline, failure, refinement, and relentless repetition crystallized into that single declaration. Sebastian exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours, the tension draining from the room like a tide finally retreating. Then the silence broke. Applause rose from the staff in a sudden heartfelt wave, hands clapping not out of obligation, but release. Corks burst free from champagne bottles with sharp, celebratory pops, echoing against the walls like fireworks contained indoors. Laughter followed, glasses were filled, and the dining room transformed, no longer a place of judgment, but of triumph, warmth, and shared victory written in bubbles and sound. The private office felt sealed off from the rest of the world, as if the restaurant beyond its walls had finally gone quiet. Soft amber light spilled across polished wood and framed awards, catching the slow arc of champagne pouring into crystal flutes. The sound was gentle but celebratory, echoing years of discipline, sacrifice, and relentless pursuit. Outside the room were critics, staff, and history. Inside, there were only two people standing in the aftermath of triumph, alone together at last. They did not rush the moment. Celebration here was intimate and stripped of spectacle. The air carried the faint scent of wine and steel, and the memory of 1,000 dishes served that night. Their shoulders loosened, their breathing slowed, and the victory felt heavier and more real. It was not applause that mattered now, but the shared understanding that something had ended and something else was beginning.
We did it. You did it.
Sebastian's voice carried a rare softness, the edge worn down by exhaustion and awe. For a man known for command and criticism, the words landed not as orders, but as acknowledgement. He looked at Elise not as a subordinate or prodigy, but as the force that had shifted his world. We make a good team, chef. Elise allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Pride warmed her chest, steady and earned. Team was not a casual word. It was a truth forged under heat. Sebastian loosened the stiff collar of his chef whites and peeled the jacket away as if shedding more than fabric. He lowered himself onto the couch with a long exhale. The couch creaked softly beneath a man who had chased perfection for most of his life.
I am tired, Elise. I have been fighting for these stars for 30 years. But tonight, watching you cook, I realized I do not want to fight alone anymore.
The confession hung between them, raw and unpolished. This was the weariness of decades spent chasing an ever-moving standard, softened by clarity and the promise of sharing the burden. Elise moved closer and sat beside him, choosing presence over words. Her steadiness grounded him, and the silence became a shelter instead of a void. "You do not have to, I am here." Her words carried the weight of partnership. She was not stepping into his shadow, she was standing beside him, unafraid.
I am a difficult man, I shout. I am obsessive.
He named his flaws plainly, laying them on the table with honesty. He waited not for forgiveness, but for understanding. "I know, I can handle the heat." Sebastian drew her gently onto his lap. Authority softened into intimacy, and what followed was invitation rather than command.
Then I have a new position for you. Partner in the kitchen and in my bed. Will you accept the promotion?